Hello, everybody. Welcome back to HR. And now we are talking about our next subject, which is performance management. So, in our Dessler textbook, in Dessler, this is chapter 7, I believe. Yeah, chapter 7, performance and talent management. In our American Management Association text, this is unit 6. So unit 6 in I think it's Diane Arthur American Management Association, unit 7 in the Dessler textbook, both good resources. So let's start talking about human resource management and appraisal. So we've already talked about the first 4 of the big 5 of staffing. We already talked about recruitment, selection, training. And now we're going to talk about appraisal or evaluations. And then after this, finally, we'll talk about compensation. Once we've done those, then we'll hit the additional 3, which is health and safety, fairness, and unions. Okay, so let's jump right into appraisal, also known as evaluation. We'll have our presentations in class. I had asked you guys to do some homework, which was to create a training exercise. We'll talk about that in class. Car cleaning company will do that in class. Let's talk now about the purpose of what we call a performance management system. So the purpose of a system is to make sure that we use or utilize every employee's KSAPs, right? Knowledge, skills, abilities, and personality. We want to make sure we get the most for our employees. Now, the key to having a very successful system is to have a structure that is problem solving rather than, you can't see it here, it says fault finding. We're not trying to find faults. We're not trying to find out what people did wrong. We're trying to solve problems. Well, how do we solve a problem? First, we have to identify. And we talked about that in training when we talked about things like the skill gap and the needs assessment and the task assessment and trying to find out what is missing. So we identify the problem and then we look for solutions. So with an employee, we need to identify the problems. So how do we identify the problems? Let's say for a teacher, how would we identify the problems that a teacher has? Well, you could just ask the students. If I'm doing a bad job, maybe you guys would know that. And now there are websites for things like that. For example, I think it's called ratemyprofessor.com is a website. And I don't know if that's the most famous one, but that's the one I know. I actually have never looked at it, so I don't know if I'm on it, but maybe I should check. So whatever it is, there are websites where you can rate a teacher. That's one way to determine if a teacher is doing well. You could talk to the administration. You could talk to the other teachers. You could do a 360-degree evaluation. Talk to Tracy, who runs the coffee shop. Talk to the people who do maintenance or the IT people. Talk to Daniel in the office. Just talk to everybody and find out if somebody's doing a good job. And what about a teacher and their students? Should I know which student has the most potential? How am I supposed to determine if a student is doing a good job? And we'll talk about that more in class. The most obvious way is, of course, I give you a test and you take the test and you get a grade. So you get a grade and that tells me if you're, good or bad. I don't like grades myself. I don't really like tests are okay. It's important to know if you learn the material. I don't think numbers really do very much because some people are, great at taking a test. Some people are terrible at it. Some people know the material but are better talking about it or applying it. Nonetheless, it's one of the best ways we have to evaluate students. So at work, we also need to evaluate our employees as managers. So one thing we want before anything, we want a mutual understanding. So we talked about this when we talked sort of about an expectation contract. The idea that when someone gets the job, we need to talk to them about what we expect from them and what they expect from us. You know, let's say that I come to CIP and I think all of the students should have 5 hours of homework every day. That's what I expect. And I expect everything to run like clockwork and everything should be perfect. And what does CIP expect from me? You know, if we have different expectations, we're not going to be satisfied mutually. Sorry, I want to get a keyboard cover. I always forget that. Okay. So we want to make sure that there's a mutual understanding about expectations, that what the employee expects from the company is put on the table and explained, and what the company expects from the employee is also explained. We want to make sure that we give feedback on past performance. How did the employee do over the last month, or 3 months, 6 months, year? We want to look for areas where the employee could improve. Notice we're not saying, here's what you did wrong. There's nothing here about telling the employee what they did wrong. That's not the purpose of an evaluation. So this is a big problem, that some managers will sit down with an employee and say, okay, look, here are the things you did wrong. And that is a terrible way to start. At best, we might use something called glow and grow. Glow is when you tell someone a good thing about them, and grow is where you tell someone a place they could improve. But you never want to tell people what they're doing wrong if you can avoid it. Then you want to talk about planning and promotion, and then evaluate the potential of an employee to continue. Now, look, you might say to an employee, hey, I'm sorry, I don't see you continuing here. That's okay. You're still not telling them what's wrong with them. You're just being honest that maybe you don't see them continuing there unless something changes. So this is the kind of thing we're trying to get out of an appraisal or evaluation. Same thing. I use the words interchangeably. These are our objectives. In addition, we want to motivate employees. This idea of if you stay at this organization, you can achieve some of your goals as long as that's compatible with what we do here. You want to become a manager, you want to learn marketing, what is it you want? We can help you achieve that. You want to learn another language, whatever it is. We want to encourage employees to express themselves, whether it's through putting up photos at their desk or how they dress or whatever. We want to identify top employees. We want to make sure that managers are able to look at their own areas of strengths and improvement. Again, not strengths and weaknesses. We don't really say that. It's not about finding your weaknesses. It's about your strengths and the things that are not your strengths yet, but could be. And then looking for mismatches. Sometimes we hired the wrong person for the wrong job. And just in general, making sure our relationships are stronger. This is about relationships. So we want to have a high level of productivity with our employees, and that doesn't mean we have a whip and we're cracking the whip and making them work hard. It means we're sitting down with them and discussing mutual expectations, what we've seen that's good, places they could improve, ways we think they could be promoted, potential they have, how they could receive additional trainings in the future, how they could, just express themselves more at work. There are a lot of benefits to this, obviously, for us. For the employer, one benefit is simply that we get data. And this is good for compensation, which will be our next subject, right? How do we know how much to pay people? We can't just give everybody the market rate or something like that. How do we know what benefits to give people? A lot of that comes from knowing if they're doing a good job. So we have to know if the employers are doing a good job, and we have to know what that means. Also, training. We can't give people training unless we know what they need to learn. Transfers, promotions, deciding who gets those. Understanding the positive and negative performance. So what is good performance, what is bad performance? And then understanding how to distribute work. As a manager, our job is to achieve the company's goals through other people. So we want to make sure that we're giving work, we're delegating it to the right people. What about for the employee? What kind of benefits does the employee get from being appraised or from having an evaluation? They get a better understanding of their duties and their responsibilities. They get a better understanding of how they're performing. And they get a nice opportunity to express their feelings, their opinions, their concerns about work. And that's very important too. So the evaluation goes both ways. It's not just the boss or the HR manager, the employer, telling the employee, here's what's good, here's what we think you can improve. It's also a chance for the employees to express how they're feeling. Or at least it should be. And this reminds me of the Hawthorne studies done in the 1940s, I want to say, with Gerald Mayo. Gerald, was that his first name? Definitely Mayo. I should look that up right now, but I can't because I'm giving a lecture. I feel like it wasn't Gerald, though. Something like that. Mayo. Gerald Mayo? Jean Mayo? George, Jeff, Jeffrey, Jennifer. It wasn't Jennifer because it was a guy. Mayo. Mayonnaise? May? Okay. So, anyway. He was the scientist who was brought in from Harvard to work on the Hawthorne studies. And one of the things they did is they studied the difference between asking employees very direct questions about work and asking employees very open questions about work. So they would have an interview with the employee where they'd say, how do you feel about using this machine? Does it work well? Do you load this in easy? Very specific questions. How do you feel about the schedule of working this time to this time? How do you feel about the payment? Very specific questions. And then with another group, they would say, how are you doing? How's it going? How's work? How's life? How's your family? Very open. And what they discovered, contrary to their expectations, was that the open questions, they got a lot more information about work, what they really needed to know. They found out if people were really concerned about the machines, the hours, the process, the management, their colleagues and peers, the environment. All that information really came out when you didn't demand that people answer specific questions. So this opportunity for the employees to express themselves is real and really does matter. So there are benefits to having a system where we make sure that the employer and the employee meet and talk about their feelings, what's going on, expectations, strengths, areas for improvement. This helps us, as I said, to make payment decisions, to make promotion decisions, to decide who we keep and who gets fired. It helps us decide on training. It helps us fix problems. It's very important for planning, and it allows the employees to express their opinions. So these are kind of the 5 things I'm looking for. So what makes a good system? Okay, we've talked about why a system is important, and it's important pretty much for these 5 reasons. What makes a good system? What are the parts of a good performance management system? Well, to have a good system, you need a standard. And by standard, we mean a level that is considered good performance. Now, what's good performance for me as a teacher is not the same as for someone who works in the coffee shop. We do totally different things. Or for Mei Ling, who's working in the office. She doesn't teach classes, but I don't handle student visa issues. We have totally different jobs. But we need to have a standard of what is good performance for each job. And then, once we have that standard, then we can evaluate an employee's current or past performance relative to the standard. So if we have a standard for a good employee at the coffee shop, then we can rate, is Kathy above or below? If we have a good standard for someone in the administration at a school, then we can rate, is Eling or Mei-Ling above or below? If we have a good standard for a teacher, then we can rate, am I above or below? But that's what has to come first. We cannot rate the teacher. So let's say that we want to know if the teachers at CIP are good. So we give out a survey to all of the students, and it has a bunch of questions. I think the teacher is fun. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is the most, 1 is the least. That's called a Likert scale. So I think the teacher is fun. The teacher is very professional. The teacher comes on time. There's too much work. Just a bunch of questions. And we take all of these, and I get, let's say, an 80 as my score. Great. Is that good or bad? I mean, it sounds good. But what if our standard is 95? Well, then 80 is terrible. What if our standard is 60? Well, then 80 is great. There's no way to judge what an 80 means without that standard. The standard has to be set first. Now, once we have a standard, then once I know what the standard is, the employee has to receive some training, feedback, incentives to eliminate their problems. I need to know, David, here's the form that we use to judge you. If you do very well on this survey, you could get a promotion, you could get a bonus, you could get a salary increase, a raise, you could get opportunities to travel to other places and present your paper at a conference, whatever. Here's our standard. And there are 10 questions. One of them says be on time. Obviously, we care about that. One of them says dress professionally. One of them says make the class fun. If you don't tell the employee that, how would the employee possibly know? Maybe I would think the standard is to be as professional as possible and never be funny and always be serious. How would I know if you don't tell the employee what it is you expect from them? So the employee must receive feedback. Now, if I say, okay, so I need to make the class fun. Well, I don't know how to do that. Maybe now I need some sort of training. Not training in being a clown, but training in pedagogy, which is the subject of how to teach. And pedagogy is a very interesting subject because it's not just about teaching in a classroom, it's about education, right? How do people learn things? And when you learn things, what's the process? Is it always up? Sometimes learning is kind of up and down. And, there's times where you get bored of something. That's interesting and important. And that would be good training if that's what they want the teachers to do. So also, let's say that they say, David, here's your survey. Here are the things you need to do. Be on time and dress professionally and make your classes fun and make sure the students get at least a 75 average, whatever. These are my standards. And let's say I meet every standard. Perfect, 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 perfect. What do I get? Nothing? Well, then why would I care? Now, of course, maybe I care because I care. Some people just care intrinsically. As McClellan said in his theory of motivation, some people are just motivated by high achievement. And that they achieve, they feel good. But not everybody. Lots of people work because they need the money. And if you don't give them an incentive to achieve these things, then what's their point? Well, I could come late sometimes. I could make the class boring sometimes. I mean, who cares? It's not going to change my salary. So there also should be incentives. So the employee needs to have a standard first. The company needs to have a standard for what is good for this job. And then that standard needs to be explained to the employee along with training to achieve that. Feedback on what they need to achieve and incentives on if they do achieve that, what do they get? Similar to Victor Vroom's theory of expectancy in motivation. The other point is that this must be a continuous process. You do not meet an employee once. Even once a year is just not enough to meet an employee for an evaluation. Twice a year is really the minimum. And the reason that this should be happening, maybe once every 3 months or once every 6 months is not only because we always want to identify or measure their performance, but also because we want to align their performance with the organization's goals, right? To align is to change the direction. So we want to, maybe I'm teaching in this direction. I just want my classes to be fun. Well, maybe after 6 months or 3 months or 1 semester, they want to change my direction. David, we want the classes to be practical. The students at CIP should be able to graduate, immediately get a job as a manager in a company doing HR, and know how to use these documents and these tests and these recruitment techniques and selection tools. We want it to be practical. And then maybe, during the semester, I'm having fun and class becomes fun. Well, at the end, they should bring me back and realign me with the company's goals. It's very important to make sure people are aligned with the company's goals. And that doesn't just happen once. A lot of managers think, well, we're going to meet with the employee, we'll tell him what we want, and he'll always do that. But life isn't like that. People do go back to old habits or bad habits or do things that seem more enjoyable. There's nothing inherently wrong about that. It's just important to just redirect them, again and again over time until finally they stay in that path. So these words are also important to me when we talk about what is a good system, because a good system sets a standard first. I'm repeating this because this is pretty important. A good system sets a standard first. It then communicates the standard through feedback. It gives the employee an incentive, some sort of bonus or reward, compensation for achieving this. It gives the employee training in what they need, these three things. And this whole process doesn't just happen once. It is continuous for the purpose of aligning the employee's behavior with the company's goals. That's kind of what we're talking about. So now let's talk about the steps. How do we appraise people? Well, let's start by taking a step back, because I'm going to show you a bunch of different possible types of appraisal. We'll talk about a 3-step model, and then I'm going to show you a whole bunch of very, very practical appraisal techniques that you really could come out of this course and immediately know how to use them in a management context. But first, let's take a step back and let's talk about what makes management effective. What makes performance management effective? Again, performance management is another word for evaluation. Let's all look at how straight I drew that line. That is solid. Gerald Mayo? No. That's Hofstede. Mayo. I bet it's not a G one, and that's what's throwing me. It's going to be like Sam or something. It's going to be like, I want to say Oscar, but that's because I'm thinking of hot dogs. Okay. So performance management is the same as evaluation, is the same as appraisal. Same word, same idea. So first of all, when we look at someone's job and we decide you're doing a great job, this could be improved, here are the problems, whatever, we don't really talk about the problems, but the areas for improvement, we're giving somebody an evaluation. Your evaluation has got to be job related, first of all. I can't say, listen, you're doing really well in school here as a teacher, but I hate your hair. It's not related to the job. You're doing well in school here as a teacher, but when you see me, could you shake my hand? Recently, you pat me on the back, and come on. It's not related to the job. It's also got to be SMART, S-M-A-R-T, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. Some people say reasonable, some people take time sensitive, but it's all, the point is, it's got to be super specific. You can't be evaluating someone on, yeah, I think you're okay. No, you're not doing great. Those aren't real things. What is your standard? The standard isn't the teacher is okay. That's not a real standard. It's got to be specific. It's got to be something you can measure. Their satisfaction rate is this. They teach this many students. Their average grade is this. They were only late this many times. It's got to be numbers and things that you can measure. As we talked about when we talked about tests, it has to be both reliable and valid, and you have to remember what these words mean because it will come back for the final. That reliable means consistent over time, and valid means it measures what it's supposed to measure. So when you're giving someone an evaluation, if I use this standard and I evaluate you today and you get 80, and then I evaluate you tomorrow and you get a 40, well, something's broken. That's not consistent. Or if I evaluate you and you get an 80, but everybody fails your class, well, then something's wrong. It's not valid. because whatever I'm measuring that gave you an 80 isn't the right thing because everybody's failing your class. Same as tests, it should be standard, should be given the same way. I should not evaluate one employee at 8 o'clock in the morning in the conference room and another employee at 11 o'clock at night at the circus. I don't know why I'm thinking of circus, but so it should be standard, it should be practical, it should be workable, it should be acceptable. The employee should also agree to this type of standard. It should support employee growth. We're not trying to cause anybody to be unhappy. The point is we want a more productive company. And to that end, the employees should also be willing to accept our suggestions or our thoughts or our opinions. If you start and the employees aren't willing at all, that's not very helpful. So we can go through these briefly again. Job related and SMART. The appraisal has to be related to the job. You are evaluating someone on the job, and it has to be specific, measurable, something that's very clear if they achieved it or did not. It's got to be reliable, which means it's got to be consistent over time. It doesn't matter who does the appraisal. If it's me or it's Eling, we should both be able to appraise the same way. It's got to be valid, which means there has to be a direct relationship between the factors we measure and the job. So if you do really well on the appraisal, that means you did well on the job. If you did badly on the appraisal, that means you do badly on the job. Or else it's not valid. If you do well on the appraisal and bad at the job, well, then what's the point of this appraisal? Obviously, it's broken. If you do terrible at the appraisal but great at the job, again, it's broken. So that's validity, right? Reliability is over time. Number 3, standardized. It has to be standard. It has to be consistent. It has to be given the same way. Practical. It shouldn't be too complex. It shouldn't take 6 weeks to appraise somebody. It shouldn't even take 6 days. It shouldn't probably even take 6 hours to appraise someone. The methods that we'll learn in this class are all reasonably fast. It should be acceptable to everyone. Acceptable to us in HR, acceptable to the employees, acceptable to the CEO and the vice president, just acceptable in general to everybody. It should support employee growth. So managers should be thinking about, how does the employer view you? Do you have confidence in your own skills to support other people, to develop them? Do I show? Oh, sorry, I wrote that wrong. Do you show interest in your employees? These are questions that a manager should be asking herself when she's thinking about, am I able to support my employees' growth? What do they think of me? Do they support me? Do they respect me? How do they act when I'm around? Am I aware of my own skills and my own places where I need improvement? And am I working on that? And am I actually interested in my employees' growth? And am I showing them that? Because if a manager isn't, then it's going to be very difficult to assist your employees in growing. And finally, we have to think about the willingness of the employees to accept our suggestions. Right? There's a very strong correlation between the manager-employee relationship and the employee's willingness to listen. Manager-employee relationships are just so critical in business, so much more important than a lot of people realize. As we've said before, there are studies that have shown that the number one reason people leave jobs is they don't have a good relationship with their boss. That's the number one reason. And sometimes the number 2 reason is they don't have a good relationship with the other coworkers. Relationships are critical, absolutely critical. So let's look first at the 3-step. This is like a very basic overview, right? Of now that we've taken a step back and we've looked at what are some of the things that an appraisal, just like a test, needs to be valid, reliable, consistent, standardized, workable, practical. The employees need to be willing, it needs to have all these components. Now we're going to look at a 3-part cycle. Can I go back in this? No, I can't. Okay. I always forget that. This is a picture next. But the first thing to do, as I said before, is set the standards. That's number 1. And included in this is telling the employees, giving them feedback, letting them know their incentives, giving them whatever training they need. They need to know the standard. You need to set the standard. That's step one. Step two, now you can assess, means measure, the employee's actual performance to the standard. So once you have the standard, number two, measure the employee's performance. Oh, it's up here. Oh, it's down here. Oh, it's the same. Measure the employee's performance, and we'll talk about how to do that. Number three, talk to the employee. Give the employee feedback. Tell them, great job. Here's how you go to here. Or, we think there are areas where you could improve, and if you improve, we could get you up to here. Or you need to do this. Just feedback to the employee about eliminating their performance deficiencies and giving them praise for where they did well. That's it. Looks like this, right? We start by establishing our standards. What are our goals and what are our standards? Then we appraise the performance, and we'll talk about methods to do this soon. And then once we've done this, we give feedback and we take corrective action. We coach, we counsel, and then maybe 3 months later, we do it again. Make sure we set the standard. Always set the standard first. Standards change. You don't have one standard for the next 5 years or 10 years. Standards may change even in 1 year. So that's going to be our general thing. Now, before we get into kind of the bulk, the important part in this subject, which is all of these methods, these practical ways to actually evaluate people, we have to decide, what are we trying to appraise? What do we want to measure? So one thing we could measure would be whether or not the employee achieved a goal. Here's the goal. We want every employee to sell 100 men's suits per month. Okay. Did you achieve that? Yes, you sold 200. Did you achieve that? No, you only sold 30. Okay, we have a standard, right? That would be a goal. It could be satisfaction-based. It could be productivity, or it could be, what am I thinking of? Productivity. Somebody's calling me. I can't answer now. Productivity or profitability. That's another word I'm thinking of. We could rate them based on competencies. Are they improving in their knowledge of the subject? We could give them tests to find out. We could rate them based on skills like communication or leadership or decision making. We could appraise them based on those expectations that we told them. I expect you to be, a teacher at this university with this level of student satisfaction and this level of student grades, and you can't come late more than 5 times or whatever. We have our expectations, but we have to decide what we're going to evaluate, because you can't just evaluate were you good or were you bad. That doesn't mean anything. So if we wanted to evaluate based on goals, we should be clear on that. So first, the employees need to know, right? You absolutely can't have an evaluation standard and you don't tell the employees. And the thing is, lots of companies do that. Lots and lots of companies, they have a standard and they just figure, well, I mean, everybody should know what this is. This is good. Everybody should know what good means. We don't need to tell the employees, but that's definitely not true. You have to tell the employees what is good performance in their job. And theoretically, each goal that you give the employees should align. Again, the direction should be the same as the organization's goals. And the idea of setting an effective goal, setting goals is really an art. A lot of people struggle with goal setting their whole life, whether it's exercise, meditation, weight loss, studying, grades, making friends, being in relationships, making money, raising children. There are just so many things people struggle with and feel like, I wanted to do that, but I just didn't get there. I didn't achieve that level of whatever. There's a real art to this. So we want to make sure our goals, again, are as smart as possible. You want your goals to be specific, not just exercise more, but go for a 10-minute walk tomorrow, or lift a 10-pound weight 5 times, or very specific, something very measurable, something that's challenging. My exercise should not be I want to get out of bed and walk to the refrigerator. That's not challenging. It should be something a little bit hard but doable. And it should encourage participation. Participation is really important, in my opinion, when you're setting goals. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that in CIP, Eling says to me, David, we want our teachers to work hard, and we want our teachers to improve. So we're going to make some challenging goals for the teachers. And I say, okay, I'm a little nervous. What's she going to say? Now, really, the best thing she could say is, David, let's make the goals together. Because any goal that an employee makes with the boss, typically the employees are more likely to achieve it. Participatively set goals tend to be more difficult than assigned ones, and they get higher performance. So this is when you ask an employee to, with you, the boss, set the goals together. Just sitting an employee down and saying, here are the goals, here's what you have to do. That is not as effective as saying, we'd like you to participate in setting your KPI, your key performance indicators, and deciding what would be the standard. We have our idea of the standard, and maybe you have your idea. We'd like to set a goal. We'd like the goal to be above this level, but let's talk about it. Do you think it's reasonable to sell 100 televisions, or 200, or 150? When you participate, you do tend to get better results. Not always, but you do tend to. Okay, so that's the first thing, is what are we going to evaluate? Now, the second thing we need to ask is who is going to do this evaluating? And there's a bunch of different choices here. So for one, I'm the manager, I could just evaluate the employees, right? That would be simple. I didn't even put that on the list. Just being evaluated by the boss. That's easy. And that's what most people do. Most companies, most organizations. They just have the manager evaluate the employees. But there are other ways to do it. So a peer appraisal. That is being evaluated not by the managers, but by your equals. So as a teacher, I would be evaluated by the other teachers. What would be some benefits to this kind of evaluation? Because I would like you to know some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks. So what's a benefit of this? Well, the other teachers, they know me in a way that the students don't. What if after class I'm not nice to, I talk about the students badly behind their back? Well, my peers would know that. What if I come in late and I sleep at my desk, and my peers would know that? It's not the perfect thing for a teacher, because we do work with students, but in some jobs like advertising or marketing or engineering, chemistry, there's lots of different jobs in accounting, in real estate, and what your coworkers say about you is very important. Next is rating committees. So a committee is a group of people. So you might have 3 people from different levels, like the senior vice president, and then your direct manager, and then your colleague, your peer. 3 people from different levels. You might have people in different departments asking you questions, but it's going to be a group of people, a panel of people who are giving you an appraisal. Self-ratings. Self-ratings are interesting. If you said, David, how is your teaching? Now, what's interesting about self-ratings is they're kind of dependent on the purpose of the rating. So studies have shown that if the rating is used for salary increases, if I know that this rating is going to determine my salary, a lot of people will raise their evaluation. So if I know this is going to affect my salary, I might say, oh yeah, I think I'm doing really great this semester. The students seem happy, they seem engaged, they're all doing very well. I think everybody's going to pass, because I know what it's about. If the survey is not connected to money, People tend to be not everybody, but a lot of people tend to be even more critical of themselves than a manager would be. So a manager, because I know what I can do, and a manager might say, well, David, here's our standard, and you're performing here. We're happy with that. You're above the standard. But if you ask me, how am I doing? I would say, well, I'm not here. Maybe I'm here. I think I could be here, but I'm not, and I could be doing. People are very critical of themselves, not so much when money is involved. Subordinates, that's being rated by the people who are under you. So for a teacher, being rated by the students, very effective. Now that doesn't work as well in every job, like accounting, that wouldn't necessarily work as well. Depending on the level of your position, if you're a manager, then maybe being rated by your subordinates, but they could be taking out a grudge on you. What if I'm the manager of all you guys and your accountants, and recently the company made me have you work on Saturday, and you're all mad at me, and then there's an evaluation and you all give me a bad rating. It's not my fault, but you want to take out your anger somewhere. So it's not necessarily appropriate there. However, for somebody who works in sales, their subordinates might be customers. I mean, they're not really subordinates, but having customers rate a salesperson can be very effective. 360 degree. Now, 360 degree is the whole circle. Everybody. You're rated by your bosses, your peers, your subordinates, everybody around, all the stakeholders, everybody rates you in the center. What's good about this? You get so much information about this person. So in HR, if we wanted to rate Elaine at CIP, how would we rate her? Well, we would have her bosses, the dean of the university, the dean of the department would rate her, and her manager would rate her, and also Mei Ling and Daniel and all the other people in the office would rate her, and also the people below her, her employees, like the teachers, we would rate her, and the students would rate her, and everybody. Now, what's the problem? Because this is great. We get the most accurate way from a 360 degree evaluation. The problem is this is a mountain of data. If you wanted to do this for a large number of employees, first of all, you must have a computer system. Trying to tabulate or collate all of this data would just be a nightmare if you don't have a computer system, and even with the system, it's a lot of data. Finally, crowd appraisals. That's where you're appraised by people you don't know. Now, maybe that would work. Let's say for me as a teacher, I make this video and I put it on YouTube and we see how many hits it gets. That could be a crowd appraisal, and it could determine. It's not a bad idea, in terms of popularity in the future. Obviously, the problem would be nobody knows me, nobody knows I'm putting this out there, nor do they know any of the professors. And so there's a very good chance none of us would get any hits. But if you rate, rating people through likes on Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or, Twitter or anything like that, that is crowd appraisal. Right? If you make a post and you get 100,000 likes, the crowd has said this is good. Okay, let's go through these briefly. So appraisals by the immediate supervisor, as I said, are still the foundation. So I didn't even put that on the list because that's the foundation, is being appraised or judged or evaluated by your supervisor. But then the other ones we talked about, peer is being appraised by your peers. I gotta change that. That's bad English. I mean, it's just too easy. Your peers is by your peers, by your equals. People who have the same level job that you have, right? The same level. And that could be a salary level. It could be a number of years of experience. It could be the same department. It could be the people you're around every day, but someone at your level. A committee is 3 to 4 other supervisors. This helps with problems of bias. What if my direct supervisor is angry at me and I don't want to be appraised by her? Well, maybe we get my direct supervisor and the CEO, who doesn't have any problem with me, and the managing partner of the firm, a bunch of different people. Next, self-ratings. As I said, employees usually rate themselves higher when it comes to money, but not for everything. Subordinates being rated by the people below you. What studies have found is that, managers, and this makes sense, managers don't like anonymous feedback. They don't like if they don't know who said they're good or bad or what they should improve. They want to know the identity. Of course they do. However, subordinates, of course, prefer to give anonymous feedback, right? You don't necessarily want the manager to know what you said. Managers who met with subordinates to discuss this and had upward feedback did improve more. So upward, remember we talked about, oh no, that's more of an organizational behavior topic, the directions of communication. But generally, communication goes in kind of three directions. Communication goes down, like when your boss tells you to do something. Communication goes up, like when you tell your boss, hey, I'm confused, or hey, you did a good job, congratulations, or hey, I hate this project. And then communication goes sideways, laterally, when you talk to the guy sitting at the desk next to you who does, the same job. You're both accountants. So information goes up, down, or lateral. And so when managers are willing to accept this upwards feedback, they did tend to get the biggest benefit. 360-degree feedback, obviously this is the best kind because we get feedback from everybody, the supervisor, the subordinates, the peers, the customers, everybody. But you really need a computerized system to compile all this information. Improvement. So if you get feedback, right, from your boss, you get it from your peers, you get it from your customers, when is it most likely that the change will actually happen? Well, one is that the feedback that you get indicates change is necessary. So if someone says, well, David, here's our standard for teachers, and you're, you're a little above the standard. And, maybe next semester you could try to, pay more attention to the quizzes, and then that'll take you up here. Or maybe next semester you could do more new research. But do I have to change? Because if I don't have to change, well, I'm already at the standard or above it. I'm going to get paid. There's no problems. Why should what's my goal for this additional work? So change happens most, and this is more of a change management subject, but change happens most when the feedback indicates that change is necessary, when the recipient, that's me, I believe change is necessary. So if I'm here and all the students are fine, everything's fine, and my boss, Eling, says, David, you have to really, really improve. But I don't believe it because I'm already here. So I know I'm going to get paid. So maybe I won't improve. It's got to be that she says, David, you're here. We need you here. You have to change. And I believe I have to change. And I have a positive view of this change. If I think like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. How am I going to do all this work? Well, then maybe I'll get from here to here. But if you want me to go from here to here, I have to hear that it's necessary. I have to believe that it's necessary. And I have to not look forward to it, but kind of think this is going to be a positive thing. Okay. So now we're at kind of the main part, which is the performance management methods. I'm gonna get into it. Yeah, I think we can. We're not that far off. So let's let's talk about them generally first, and then we'll take a little break, and on the next video, we'll kind of get a little deeper into them, because I consider this to be quite important. And then after this, there's still a few things related to coaching and problems in the appraisals that we need to talk about. So let's start by talking about it's a lot. It is, there's no question about that. And you guys are pretty lucky that it is open book, because in every other semester, my students had to memorize all of these. So you guys are definitely lucky for that. So what are we talking about here? Well, we've already talked about, right, just to make sure, we talked about what is performance management and appraisal, why is it so important, how does it benefit the employer and the employee. We talked about what makes effective management, performance management or appraisals. We talked about that 3-step cycle. We talked about what should be appraised and who should do the appraising. So already quite a bunch of stuff. And now we're talking about the methods. So there are these 12 methods, and we're going to put these into categories. So let's talk about these categories first. And these categories are really important to me. So how can I best write this? One category is quantitative, and that is things where we use numbers. One category, and this doesn't make it much better, but is qualitative. So maybe here we'll put a T. Quant and qual. Qualitative is not about numbers. Qualitative is about opinions. And then the final one is rank. And rank is when we have an order. So every one of these 12 is going to be in one of these categories. Some of them, like for example, the weighted checklist is quantitative. It has numbers. Some of them, such as an essay has no numbers. It is qualitative. It's about opinions. And some of these, such as an alternation ranking, is about rank. Who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 3. So things with numbers, things with opinions, things with rank. Now let's just, before we get into these, just think of it very common sense. So I want to know who's the best student in our class. Well, one way I could do this would be to just look at your grades. Is that quantitative, qualitative, or ranking? Just to look at your grades. It's quantitative because it's about numbers. Is it ranking? Well, your grades will give me probably a rank, but is it possible that every student in my class got 85? Is that possible? Sure. So then there's no rank. Everybody's equal. Maybe 17 students got a 90 and all the rest got an 80. That's possible. So it's not about rank. It's about numbers. Now, if it was about rank, I could say, okay, the number 1 student in our class is this person. Number 2 is this person. Number 3, that doesn't tell you, what if this is a really hard class and the number 1 person just, barely passed. Number 2 is still below them. Number 3 is still below them. Number 4 is still below them. This doesn't necessarily mean they failed. It just means the numbers are starting low. They're not starting high. But I don't care. I'm not looking at the numbers. I'm just looking at the order. And qualitative would just be my opinion of the students. Well, I think this student, they're not very good at, taking notes in class, but they asked really good questions. This other student, they're not really paying attention, I think. And this other student, they seem to like the subject, but they don't seem to understand it. So numbers, opinions, rankings are different ways to appraise. And we're going to put everything into those categories. Okay, let's take a break there because I know that's a lot. And we'll come back and we'll do the second video in a little bit.